The International Criminal Court is in the news, this time for arresting former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte on charges of presiding over the killings of suspected drug lords and drug dealers. The charges may or may not stick, but the arrest has exposed deep divisions in Philippine politics and opened President Ferdinand Marcos's government up to allegations of plotting to remove the Duterte dynasty from public life. A cell with a sink, toilet, bed, desk and bookshelves, with some facilities for the sportingly inclined thrown in for good measure. For Rodrigo Roa Duterte, this is home for the next few years. A far cry from the mansion in a sprawling Malacanang Palace complex he lived in when he was president of the Philippines. Duterte was arrested and whisked away in a chartered plane to face justice at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Netherlands. His alleged crime: ordering the killings of thousands of drug dealers and users. He's accused of creating and arming so-called death squads that carried out widespread extrajudicial killings. Duterte is said to be the first Asian former head of state to go on trial at the I.C.C, a court of last resort created more than 2 decades ago to prosecute individuals for war crimes, crimes against humanity, aggression and genocide. Duterte's arrest was as dramatic as his flight to prison. He was detained soon after he returned to Manila from Hong Kong. Videos circulated on local media and shared by social media users showed Duterte resisting arrest inside the aircraft. Security officials led him to a holding room where he was read the charges against him. In a video posted on Instagram by Duterte's daughter Veronica from Manila's Delamore Air Base, where he was kept in custody, the former president could be seen questioning the reason for his arrest.
What is the law and what is the crime that I committed?
Within hours of his arrest, he was bundled into a private plane and flown via Dubai to The Hague. A pitched battle is now being fought in the streets from Manila to Amsterdam. Pro and anti-Duterte demonstrations have been held. Several dozen activists held a protest and vigil at The Hague, calling for Duterte to be held accountable for his actions. Families of victims watched a live broadcast of the embattled former president's pre-trial at the I.C.C and demanded justice for their loved ones. Family members shared how their loved ones were killed during the anti-drug campaign carried out by Duterte's government and demanded accountability for their deaths.
We want to see from I.C.C is that Rodrigo Duterte, to pay up for his crimes against humanity, crimes against the Filipino people, for the 30,000 and more victims of extrajudicial killings, killed under his watch, killed under his command. Until now, there is no justice.
Not to be outdone, hundreds of Duterte supporters gathered at a park in Manila to campaign for his release from the I.C.C. Some of them held up placards that read, "Bring PRRD home" and "Justice for PRRD." PRRD is a short form for President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
We already have laws which are working, so why need the international court? We have our own laws governing the Philippines.
Duterte's daughter Sarah, who is the current vice president of the Philippines, said the former president was illegally arrested.
If you talk to lawyers, they call it extraordinary rendition, but for a family member like me, that's kidnapping.
Yeah.
That's forcibly taking my father to another country and illegally arresting him. So that's clearly kidnapping.
A 15-page I.C.C. arrest warrant for Duterte outlines the accusations against the former Philippines president. The warrant charges him with murder as a crime against humanity.
And in issuing the warrant, the judges have found reasonable grounds to believe that Mr. Duterte has committed the crime of murder as the founder, as the head of the so-called Davao death squad, as the mayor of Davao City, and then later as the president of the Philippines between 2011 and 2019.
Duterte led the Philippines from 2016 to 2022. As long-time mayor of the southern Philippine city of Davao, Duterte was known as the Punisher for his harsh policies. His profanity-packed speeches and death threats to drug gangs were a feature of his presidency.
Hitler massacred 3 million Jews. Now, there's a 3 million drug addicts. There are. I'd be happy to slaughter them.
In February 2018, the I.C.C. prosecutor's office said that it would conduct a preliminary investigation into deaths in the Philippines. Barely a month later, Duterte said that he would withdraw the Philippines from the I.C.C. The exit took effect in March 2019. But under I.C.C. rules, even if a state withdraws as a member, it retains jurisdiction over crimes within its jurisdiction committed during the membership period. The government of President Ferdinand Marcos initially ruled out cooperating with the probe, but his stand changed as his relations with the Dutertes unraveled.
Interpol asked for help, and we obliged because we have commitments to the Interpol, which we have to fulfill. If we don't do that, they will no longer help us with other cases involving Filipino fugitives abroad.
But Duterte's legal counsel calls it a veritable kidnapping and a case of settling political scores.
The whole world has witnessed the degrading fashion in which a former president of a sovereign country was bundled into a private aircraft and summarily transported to The Hague. To us lawyers, this would be called an extrajudicial rendition. To the less legally inclined, it was a pure and simple kidnapping. My client was denied all access to the legal recourse in the country of his citizenship, and this all in the nature of political score settling.
A case of political witch hunt it could well be. After all, there's no love lost between the Duterte and Marcos dynasties. It was supposed to be a win-win proposition for the two families. Marcos would stand for president, and Duterte's daughter Sara would run for vice president in the 2022 election. For Marcos, a win would mark his return from the political wilderness. For the Dutertes, retaining a stake in power would help to keep the I.C.C. at bay. As it turned out, the duo won a landslide in the election. But soon, the relationship turned sour. In June 2024, Sara Duterte resigned from her post as Secretary of the Department of Education and Vice Chairperson of the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict. Things took a turn for the worse in November 2024 when she told a press conference that she had spoken to an assassin and told him to kill Marcos, his wife, and the Speaker of the lower chamber of the Philippines legislature if she were to be killed. In February 2025, the lower chamber of legislature impeached her. The upper chamber will take up the impeachment motion in June. Meanwhile, the Philippines is gearing up for midterm elections in May. It's a litmus test of Marcos's popularity and a chance for him to consolidate power and groom a successor before his single 6-year term ends in 2028. Incidentally, Speaker Martin Romualdez, who is Marcos's cousin, is tipped to stand for president. That would perhaps explain the alacrity with which Marcos got Duterte arrested. If the Dutertes perform better in the midterm elections, they would have enough lawmakers to stave off impeachment. Sara Duterte wants to be the next president, so clearly the family feud will only get uglier. Duterte released one last video message on his social media addressing his supporters before landing in the Netherlands.
This will be a long legal proceedings. I say to you, I will continue to serve my country at so be it. Ganun na. This is very good. Salamat.
On 23rd September, Duterte is set to appear before the I.C.C. for the confirmation of charges hearing. A trial will likely start in early 2026. Meanwhile, keeping him company in the prison is Kosovo's former president, Hashim Thaçi, who is awaiting his war crimes trial, and former Bosnian Serb General Ratko Mladic, who was convicted for genocide. Other inmates include militia leaders from Sudan, Mali, and the Central African Republic.